So The Last Dance was last night. And there was a lot of different elements. They went in on the gambling. They also went in on Michael Jordan being apolitical. And they told the story about, in where Michael grew up. Jesse Helms had a regrettable history, and there was an African-American candidate running, and Michael did not go out and endorse him. Now, Michael did acknowledge that he was willing to donate, or his mom was, to the campaign, but he didn't want to go out and actively endorse him. And this is the interesting thing about this. Why do we make athletes be politicians? Now, I'm not one of these people that believe stay in your lane. I'm not saying that. I think you can go in any lane you want, but you don't have to stay in your lane, but you sure as hell have the right to pick your lane. You don't have to stay in anybody's lane, but I can pick my lane, can I? I also think it's really easy for average guys to have courage politically. Average football players, average basketball players. You're average. You're replaceable. You got nothing to lose, bruh. Michael was representing Nike and McDonald's. He was the face of the NBA. It is easy for the garage band to lament corporate America. But what if you're the Eagles in your prime, or Jay-Z in your prime, or U2 in your prime, and you're grossing $175 million, and you're dealing with corporate entities? Michael was not just representing Michael. He was representing shoe brands, Nike, McDonald's, the league, the Bulls. He mattered more. So, yes, you have to consider that. Most people who are representing things beyond themselves, listen, I've had stuff written in my contract where I can't give political either activism or donations. I can't represent an ammunition company. I mean, I'm a sportscaster. Michael Jordan ran the NBA. And so the other part of this, though, is why did Tiger Woods get heat for certain things not being political? Phil Mickelson doesn't. We pick and choose. And I just think it's incredibly unfair to demand certain athletes have to choose a lane. I am not a stay-in-your-lane guy, but don't you have a right to choose the lane? And Michael Jordan commented on that, about not jumping in to politics at that point in his life.
I do commend Muhammad Ali for standing up for what he believed in, but I never thought of myself as an activist. I thought of myself as a basketball player. I wasn't a politician when I was playing my sport. I was focused on my craft. Was that selfish? Probably. But that was my energy. That's where my energy was.
Outside of LeBron, how many NBA players are politically active? Let's start with almost none. A handful. Most of the older smart guy like Chris Paul's into it, kind of. But the reality is Steve Kerr, yes, his dad was a diplomat. Greg Popovich, in his 70s, different generation, was in the military. Why does Damian Lillard have to be great at anything other Damian Lillard wants to be great at? He's great at the hip-hop thing, and he's great at basketball. Good for him. And the other thing I find refreshing about Michael Jordan, he hasn't apologized for any of his actions. He hated Isaiah, and he's sticking to it. And he gambled a little, and he's not apologizing. And he's not politically active, and he's not walking it back. Everybody now is terrified of any pushback. And Michael's like, no, that's who I am. That's the lane I chose. And that one I didn't choose. And I'm not walking it back. It was funny this weekend. I was had the great fortune to talk to a CEO. She's really talented. And we were talking about people in our business that have flourished. And she says, this CEO said, the key to it really is have an opinion and go all the way with it. And be able to handle mean people on Twitter. That's Michael. I find it incredibly refreshing that he's not going to apologize on his political inactivism. He's not apologizing for hating Isaiah. He's not apologizing for gambling. Why should he? All lanes he chose. 27 seasons in the NBA as a head coach. He's got a unique connection to Michael Jordan. He coached against him in an all-star game. Had a young Kobe with him. He went to North Carolina, by the way. George Karl was a heck of a basketball player. Dean Smith there. Also lost to Jordan in the finals in 96 with those Sonics teams, my hometown team that I grew up loving. And George is joining us. Let's first of all, George, how are you? How are things?
Well, I'm getting a little lazy hibernating every day, but, Denver's a great city to live in. I can't wait till we can get out and socialize and start figuring out our new world.
Yeah. So go back to the 96 finals, and you had a very good Sonics team. You also had a very good defensive guard in Gary Payton, and my recollection's fuzzy. What was your defensive game plan against Michael Jordan?
Well, initially we put Hersey Hawkins on him, and we kind of split the responsibilities between Hersey and Detlef and Gary. Gary had a little bit of a calf problem, and we wanted to save Gary for the fourth quarter. But Michael's a guy that you got to figure out when and how you want to double team, or if you want to double team him. Our problem in 96, he was more of a jump shooter than a rim attacker.
Yeah.
And so we actually started, I think, most of the games not doubling him and keeping our double team packages ready for the fourth quarter or a close game situation. But, I mean, he's just one of those 5 players in basketball that if he gets 25 points and shoots a low percentage, you're just celebrating. You're never going to stop him. And he just touches the ball too much. He's too talented. He has all the offensive tools. He can score inside. He can score outside. We didn't think he was a great three-point shooter, but he made enough that you had to honor it.
Yeah. Gary Payton was considered the glove and was a very good defensive player. Were there ever moments that when Gary was healthy, you thought he could at least slightly slow Michael?
I would say slightly slow him would be as far as I would go, and maybe a little bit more. I've never covered a guy that could put a big number up on you and do it efficiently. A lot of times when guys get 40 or 50, they shoot 35 or 40 shots. Michael would get 40 shooting 21 shots. And it was just so efficient and so intimidating that, and then if you would double team, they had enough weapons, offensive weapons, to beat you with, other guys on their team, especially when Pippen became more of a superstar of all, and his offense was really first class. But the 96 series was a defensive series.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, I think a lot of these series that you're watching, if you look back, they're very defensive minded. Very few 100-point games. I think we had the Phoenix series in the episode yesterday. They had 129 to 120-point game, but that was the exception back then. I think in our series against them, we scored 101 time. I think they scored 101 time, and we had a couple scores in the low 80s. And they were just, I think that the greatness of that team was their defense.
Yeah.
And Michael was a special offensive player, but the other guys, you had some luxuries, and True Coach, I think, helped them when he got into the rhythm and flow at the end of Michael's run. I think that helped them because then they had 3 weapons out there. But I think their specialness is because of their defense.
When you coach stars, you had Peyton and Kemp. People think it's easy. When you look at The Last Dance and you see that Phil Jackson dealt with Jerry Krause and the Pippen injury and Michael Jordan, I think it's a fairly delicate balance. I think I feel better. I mean, I've been really impressed with watching Phil Jackson manage it. You've had GMs when you can battle. What do you make of Phil Jackson's balancing act through all of it?
I've said what you just said there to at least 50 people, that I've always respected Phil, and I think he's a hell of a coach. Coaching against him was very, very difficult. But his calmness and his mindfulness was the reason why that organization stayed together. I mean, there were so many things in that organization that the bomb could go off and didn't. The bomb did not go off. It almost went off, but it never went off until, of course, they let Phil go. But, I mean, the 6 years they were together, they won all 6 years of championship. And people don't get it. I mean, they don't understand how hard it is to win a championship and then do it again and then do it again. I think in last night's episode, I think you saw Michael Jordan mentally fatiguing to the stress of what was going on. In the Phoenix series, it was a series that both teams, I think, were somewhat fatigued because New York had taken Michael to 7, and the Seattle team had taken Phoenix and Barkley to 7.
Yep.
And that series, if you watch Game 5 and Game 6, you can see that both teams are a little fatigued physically and mentally.
Dennis Rodman is a unique personality, and I watched Phil handle him pretty deftly. Did you ever have a player that was needier, that was higher maintenance, that even compared to a Rodman?
I've never had a guy as probably. I mean, I think Phil has done a great job with Rodman over the years, and I think Rodman's got to be on the all-star of high energy, high maintenance basketball players, and I just think that Rodman. I think everybody was surprised when Phil and Chicago took him.
Yeah. And
then they made it work, and I admire them for doing that. And that's all going through the Reinsdorf scenario. As Krause and Reinsdorf not wanting to pay their players in an era that I think the NBA the contracts were blowing up. I went to Seattle for $250,000 in 1991. In 97, I made $3 million. And so that was the era, I think, where basketball the contracts was getting bigger and doubling and multiplying, and the factor that players were getting pissed off a lot along the way.
Yeah. Kobe said something last night on that special, the late Kobe Bryant. He said, when I came into the league was older. And now I look at the NBA, and more 20-year-olds are entering the league, and more young international players enter the league, and the league is a younger league. I don't know if it's a better or a worse league, but when you look at the NBA today to when you coached in it, do you think it is diluted?
Well, I think there were more veteran teams in the NBA when I coached, and I think what you're seeing now is personnel people and maybe contract situations are saying play the younger player, give them the opportunity to grow up. Because if they grow up early, then you get a benefit in your next contract. And so I think today's league has, 10, maybe 15, maybe even 20 teams experimenting with where they're going to go, as where I think in the old days, in the 90s and the 80s and even early 2000s, there were more management people thinking to establish your team with veteran players and then add a couple young players and see if they work.
In your book, Furious George, when Michael went to baseball, you almost got Scottie Pippen, didn't you, to Seattle?
Yeah, that was the trade that, as a basketball staff, we met for a couple of days, and we decided we would like to do it. We went to our owner and got his permission, but the trade was based upon I think the draft was on a Tuesday. And over the weekend, we got the permission from the ownership to do it. But somewhere along the way, it got leaked, and the streets of Seattle just blew up in Sean's favor, and my owner backed out. But the trade couldn't have been consummated on Sunday because there was a draft pick involved that they wanted a certain player to be drafted at when we were picking in the first round. And what happened I'm on the phone with Jerry Krause, about 5 minutes before our pick. And he starts offering millions of dollars to make the trade. And I said, Jerry, my owner's not going to make the trade. He's not going to make the trade. He went from 1 to 3 to 5. And I'm going, there's no way we can make this trade. And our owner's just not going to buy it.
Wow. You coached an all-star game against Michael with Kobe. Did you know instantly that Kobe was going to become the closest thing to Michael?
I think we saw a little bit of that early in Kobe's career. But the one thing we did, I think Kobe early in his career forced the game. And I think Michael kind of talked about that in last night's episode about how he likes to go one-on-one. He likes to take the tough shot. I think Michael's background of being Carolina, being a weak game, and not taking tough shots, I thought that always helped Michael. And I think Kobe being out of high school, I think early in his career, I think he turned some coaches off and maybe even some players off with his selfishness a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're in Denver, and you're in one of the best places in America to be during a kind of a quarantine. So I hope you're doing well. It's great to talk to you.
I'm doing great. My health, I'm as light as I've ever been. I'm down to about 230 pounds, and I feel great. But I've become a little bit of a bike rider, not like a lot of Coloradans who go really fast on the bike path. I cruise on my bike path.
Oh, good for you. Good talking to you, George.
Okay. Colin, always good talking to you. You have some great insights. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, sir. 27 years coaching in the NBA.